where he said she's not his type and then identified someone who was his wife. So that, I think, undermined that. And the comment, too, fortunately, for a million years, stars like me could assault women. That's a problem. But remember, she had two people who contemporaneously heard about this, and they both told the jury that she called them immediately. He didn't really mount a defense on them.
This is an ABC News special report.
I'm Diane Macedo. We're coming on the air with breaking news. Republican Congressman George Santos is now in custody after turning himself in on federal criminal charges. Unsealed court filings show he's facing 13 counts in total, stemming from wire fraud, money laundering, theft of public funds, and making false statements. The U.S. attorney on the case says in a statement, taken together, the allegations in the indictment charged Santos with relying on repeated dishonesty and deception to ascend to the halls of Congress and enrich himself. Senior investigative reporter Aaron Kaczynski is here with the details. Aaron, walk us through these charges and what they mean for Santos.
Congressman Santos turned himself in just moments ago. He has now been placed under arrest at the federal courthouse in Central Islip on Long Island in the New York suburbs. And the criminal indictment outlines 3 distinct schemes that Santos allegedly used, as the U.S. Attorney Breon Peace says, to ascend to the halls of Congress. The indictment charges him with, at the height of the pandemic, taking unemployment benefits that were meant to help people who needed it during the COVID-19 pandemic and using it for himself. The indictment also charges him with recruiting donors for his campaign and using those campaign funds for his personal use. The money that was supposed to go for his election to Congress actually went into his personal piggy bank, according to federal prosecutors. And finally, the federal charges accuse Santos of making false statements to the House of Representatives about the source of his income, about money that he received coming in and going out. And so all told, they say that this is the height of deception by a sitting U.S. congressman who has now been placed under arrest.
And I want to bring in our senior congressional correspondent, Rachel Scott, for more on the repercussions here. Rachel, Santos has been facing accusations for quite a while now. What does this mean for his future in Congress, for him now to be federally charged?
Well, Diane, Congressman George Santos has been accused of fabricating almost every single detail of his life, from his resume to his background. And while he has been under scrutiny for those allegations, it is the focus of this investigation on the money, about how he possibly misused and illegally used his campaign finances that could land him in even more legal jeopardy here, where he could currently face up to 20 years in prison on the 13 counts that federal prosecutors are moving forward with. We know that Santos, for his part, has been defiant through it all. We have had the opportunity to press him multiple times about many of these allegations back on Capitol Hill in the halls of Congress. He has told me repeatedly that he will not step down, that he will not resign. It remains unclear how he will plead when he enters the courtroom in just a few hours, but we do know that he has launched his re-election campaign. One thing that is very notable here is that even if Santos is convicted, he could still continue as a member of Congress. It would take 2/3 of a majority vote in the House in order to remove him from office. And as we know right now, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, even in the face of these charges, has stood beside Congressman Santos. He says that he's waiting to see how this all plays out in the courts, but you can certainly expect pressure to grow on the Republican congressman to step down and resign, Diane.
And I want to go to Chief Washington correspondent Jonathan Karl for more. John, big picture, what's the impact here to have a congressman now federally charged?
Well, first of all, these are serious charges. This is not a run-of-the-mill indictment. One that stands out to me, in addition to the campaign finance charges, the charges of effectively money laundering, are the allegations that he effectively stole money through the unemployment system, the extension of unemployment benefits during the pandemic, that he was getting these benefits, asserting each and every week that he was unemployed when he was actually drawing a salary at one point from his company in Florida and another point from his campaign. He was doing this while he was running for Congress. So these are serious charges. There'll be immense pressure on the Republican leadership. to do something about this. Santos has already been stripped of his committee assignments. The question is, will Congress act to do the vote that Rachel referred to, a vote to expel him from Congress? I would not think that that is off the table. Certainly, I believe that would happen if he were actually convicted of these charges, but I think there'll be pressure to do it even with this indictment. One big factor here, though, is the size of the Republican majority. One reason why Kevin McCarthy has stood by Santos through all of this so far, it's only a 5-seat Republican majority. Every seat really matters in this Congress. And in many ways, Kevin McCarthy can't afford to lose a single seat. But again, that said, these are extremely serious charges against Congressman Santos.
They sure are, and I want to bring that point to our chief legal analyst, Dan Abrams. Dan, what are the potential consequences here for Santos and the legal ramifications in terms of a precedent?
Yeah, I mean, look, he could be facing up to 20 years for each of the most serious charges here. And if you actually look at the indictment, you see what they've done is they've basically said that through wire fraud, counts 1 through 5, he's gone about getting the money in a fraudulent way, meaning getting people to go out there, claim it's for the campaign, then get that money, and then counts 6 to 8 are him transferring the money into his own personal account. Same thing you see for the unemployment. Count 9 is the getting the money, 10 and 11 is the transferring of it into his account. But a couple of big picture things to think about here. Number one is this is going to take time, right? From a political perspective, it's going to allow, if they so choose, Republicans to punt and to say, well, look, you know, let's see what happens in this trial. Hey, these are just accusations at this point, which is true. These are just accusations at this point. And a trial could take, 6 months from now. It could take a year from now. It could push us back to the point where George Santos is up for re-election again, and that as a result, as a political matter, the amount of time that it takes could allow them to postpone that decision. The second thing I would say about these charges, are what this isn't about. This isn't about George Santos lying about his resume. That's not what these charges are going to. This is about stealing money. And they're pretty clear here in part about what they were for, that Santos was using it to make personal purchases, including designer clothing. So they're trying to make the point that this isn't close, is what prosecutors are saying. This isn't ambiguous. This is money that he claimed was for his campaign that was used on things that in no way, shape, or form could have been used on his campaign. And the amounts that you're talking about on the unemployment piece with regard to COVID are even higher and more significant. And they're making the point, this is big money, this matters. And as Jonathan Karl correctly said, these are very serious charges.
Rachel, what's next for Santos today?
Well, Diane, we have just learned that Congressman George Santos met the FBI in an off-site location this morning and surrendered. We have also just learned, according to sources, that before leaving for New York yesterday, he did inform the staff of House Speaker Kevin McCarthy that he would, in fact, be charged. In just a few hours this afternoon, we are expected to see him inside of the courtroom behind me. And then the big question will be, how will he plead? Will he plead guilty or not guilty? We know that he has remained defiant in the face of all of the controversy and accusations against him. But again, one thing does remain clear. After this, he will return to Washington, D.C., and unless further action is taken against him, even in the face of these charges, he will continue as a regular member of Congress, Diane.
All right, Aaron, Rachel, John, Dan, thank you all. We're going to return now to your regular programming. For those of you in the West, that's Good Morning America, and we will have much more on this on World News Tonight with David Muir. I'm Diane Macedo. Have a great day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
This is ABC News Live. The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers.
In Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
From the Capitol.
Destructive Cat 4 storm.
Here along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye. Let's go.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
For over 20 years, we've given some real-life superhero moms the mother of all surprises. Oh my goodness! It's GMA's Breakfast in Bed.
This is amazing. I had no idea.
And now, this year, we want to give our biggest, most epic live Mother's Day surprise yet to the most deserving mom.
Oh my goodness!
So go now to goodmorningamerica.com or scan this QR code to find out how to enter to share your mom's story and honor her the GMA way.
Brooke Shields, the most photographed woman in the world.
A sexualized child model.
Exploitation.
What happened to her isn't really about her, it's just about women.
I let myself be vulnerable, and this is the first time I've ever spoken about what happened. I thought my one no should have been enough, you know.
When someone like Brooke Shields talks about it, it makes a difference.
I'm amazed that I survived any of it.
She was extremely beautiful.
Breathtaking.
She's something else. She was not easy for people, but apparently she was very worth it.
If Elizabeth Taylor was coming of age today, she'd be somebody like Taylor Swift. Elizabeth Taylor is the first influencer. This is who I am. This is what I do.
She liked guys. She liked sex.
More power to her.
I have a great passion. I can't do anything halfway.
Superstar Elizabeth Taylor. Sunday night at 10/9 Central on ABC.
Almond Mom is a little bit bought into diet culture, but it tends to veer on the side of overdoing it.
I had to hit spin class, you know, I had to earn this food.
To be in a restrictive mode with food is almost like the worst joke ever.
Food should not be good or bad.
Every soul's body is important, no matter what size it is.
Where body positivity has the potential to become detrimental is the, nah, girl, you're good.
Impact by Nightline, now streaming on Hulu.
I feel like the weight of the world is on my shoulders. I've seen a lot. I've been through a lot without ever having a chance to share my side of the story.
Aaron Carter's life story in one sentence.
The drugs, the drinking.
Everything goes back to tragedy.
But just know I've turned it around, and I've got a lot to say. There's always two sides to every story.
With so much happening these days, it's hard to keep up.
Things change hour by hour, minute by minute.
The historic weather that's now unfolding.
The worries on Wall Street.
We're bringing you the Right Now. Been a nationwide teacher shortage.
The Right Now look at the day ahead. An alert this morning for dog owners and the key takeaways from the biggest stories.
World News Now and America This Morning, America's #1 early morning news.
Today does feel a little different. Early mornings on ABC News Live.
Welcome back to ABC News Live. We have breaking news. Republican Congressman George Santos is now in custody after turning himself in on federal criminal charges. Unsealed court filings show he's facing 13 counts in total, 7 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of money laundering, 1 count of theft of public funds, 2 counts of making materially false statements to the House of Representatives. The U.S. attorney on the case says in a statement, taken together, the allegations in the indictment charge Santos with relying on repeated dishonesty and deception to ascend to the halls of Congress and enrich himself. I want to bring in our chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl. John, how significant is this to have a sitting member of Congress now indicted on federal charges?
It's significant in and of itself, but it's especially significant because of the seriousness of these charges. Multiple counts here alleging that Congressman Santos was effectively laundering money, using illegally obtaining money through his campaign and using it for personal expenses, and also that he was fleecing the unemployment system. It alleges here that Santos was collecting unemployment unemployment benefits as they were extended through the pandemic, even though he was receiving money from his company based in Florida, and also through his campaign, that he was illegally obtaining and swearing to the fact that he was unemployed while he was running for Congress. It's really quite astounding. So yes, serious charges. The big question now is, what will the Republican leadership do about it? How will they respond now that one of their members faces these serious charges?
Yeah, big ramifications here. I want to bring our senior investigative reporter, Aaron Katursky. Aaron, Santos had been facing accusations of lying in several areas for a while now. Any surprises in this indictment compared to what was kind of out there publicly?
It's not the lying, it's the financial shenanigans that federal prosecutors say they've uncovered that really are at the core of this 13-count indictment. And what may be surprising is just how blatant it seems to be, the way the indictment lays it out. Federal prosecutors have accused Congressman Santos of engaging in a scheme to defraud supporters of his candidacy for the House and obtain money from them by fraudulently inducing supporters to contribute funds to a company that he set up. And the indictment says he did that under the false pretense that the money would be used to support his candidacy, when in fact Santos actually spent thousands of dollars of the solicited funds on personal expenses, including luxury designer clothing and credit card payments. So he's telling his supporters, support my candidacy. He's using the money to pay personal expenses, and the indictment includes emails and text messages that Santos sent soliciting these funds. So it's money received, and the charges also include how he spent the money going out.
I want to bring in senior reporter Catherine Falders for more on that. Catherine, what are the potential ramifications here for Santos?
Yeah, it's a good question, and members up here, Republican members, some of them have been calling on him to resign. Most, in some cases, have said that this is just a distraction politically, that they still have to be talking about this. But in terms of Santos continuing to serve in Congress, if he's convicted, he can continue to serve. There's conversations around whether he would be forced to resign, whether he would have to resign. In order for that to happen up here, that requires a 2/3 vote of the majority of the House for him to be removed. Look, we've tried to ask Speaker McCarthy about this. He was asked about this last night. He said that he hadn't seen the counts at that point, so he dodged the questions a bit here. But Kevin McCarthy has said that if Santos is found guilty, that's when he would make a decision on whether to comment on whether he should be called on to resign. But still, we haven't heard from any Republicans so far after this 13-count indictment has been unsealed. It'll be interesting to see whether they change their tune, Diane, up here after reading over these charges.
John, I'm reading through what the U.S. attorney on this case said in this statement, and one of the quotes here is, he used political contributions to line his pockets, unlawfully applied for unemployment benefits that should have gone to New Yorkers who had lost their jobs due to the pandemic, and lied to the House of Representatives. Beyond the legal ramifications here, what are the political ones?
Well, it's quite a rap sheet. As Catherine mentioned, the process for removing a member of Congress who doesn't voluntarily resign is expulsion, a vote of expulsion, which requires a 2/3 majority. It's only happened 5 times in the history of the U.S. House of Representatives, and 3 of those who were expelled because they were fighting with the Confederacy during the Civil War. So it's not something that has happened frequently, but I did cover one of the 5 cases, and that was the case of James Traficant, a member of Congress from Ohio who was convicted of bribery and tax fraud and various other charges back in 2002. He was expelled, but not until he was convicted. But once he was convicted, the expulsion happened quickly. In fact, the vote was 420 to 1. So I suspect what Kevin McCarthy will do here will be to say that Santos deserves a right to defend himself, to be presumed innocent, and that they will not act immediately to expel him. Keep in mind, he's already been stripped of his committee assignments, so he's effectively a member of Congress who can only vote on the floor. That's only one aspect of being a member of Congress. So he's already been stripped of his committee assignments. But you know, these charges, it really isn't a question. If he were to be convicted of this, to me, it's impossible to think that he wouldn't be expelled from the Congress.
Go to our senior congressional correspondent, Rachel Scott, on that point. Rachel, the House Republicans have a razor-thin majority right now. So what are the ramifications here for the party?
There are huge ramifications here, Diane. I mean, and this is something that obviously House Speaker Kevin McCarthy has a keen eye on, this razor-thin majority where he really can't afford to lose a single vote. Just look at some of the last legislation that was passed in the House by Republicans here. Their effort to raise the debt ceiling, that big bill that was passed just days ago. Santos was actually the deciding vote on that. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy really only passed that bill within a one-vote margin, and Santos voted last in that vote. And so this is obviously something that Speaker McCarthy is keenly aware of, as is Republican leadership. And so he has maintained this stance that he will not come out and call on him to resign or take any further action against him unless Santos is found guilty and convicted of a lot of these charges that we are seeing unfold. But the pressure on House Speaker Kevin McCarthy will be enormous at this point, as well as other members of Congress. We have seen Democrats and Republicans come together united in their rebuke of Congressman George Santos, saying that he deceived voters to get to the halls of Congress, calling him a stain on the House of Representatives. So now the ball is back in House Speaker Kevin McCarthy's court. It'll be interesting to see what he has to say now that this indictment has actually been unsealed, now that we are learning more about the charges that he is facing. But our guess here is that he will maintain this position here that he has been, that he will not move to call on him to resign or step down until we know more about whether or not he is convicted of these charges. But as of now, Congressman George Santos has already recused himself of his committee assignments. That was a lot of discussion just a few weeks ago about whether or not he'd be stripped of his committee assignments, facing all of these accusations. Santos made the decision to remove himself. At this point, I don't think Congressman Santos is going to step down himself. He's already launched his re-election campaign, Diane.
Aaron, does this indictment mean this investigation is now over, or could more come out of this?
Federal prosecutors will always say, Diane, that the investigation remains ongoing and active, and they could yet bring more charges. We know, for example, that one of the things the FBI had looked at during the course of the investigation was a GoFundMe campaign that Congressman Santos had been involved with to raise money for a sick veteran's dog. There were $3,000 raised, and the veteran told us that he never saw any of the money. And we know that the FBI, during the course of the investigation, took a look at that, and that's not part of these criminal charges. So they may yet add additional counts if they deem that necessary or if that investigation bears fruit. Keep in mind, too, Diane, Santos has been under investigation by multiple offices, not just the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York, but 2 district attorney's offices in Nassau County and Queens County that encompass his district, along with the New York Attorney General's office.
Catherine, what's next for Santos now?
In terms of what's next, we're expecting him to likely appear in court later today. I think in terms of what's next for him up here, we have to keep an eye on calls for him to resign. We haven't heard from many members since the news broke yesterday, but now that we know that there's a 13-count criminal indictment, how does that tune change? As John Carl said, he doesn't expect Santos to just say that he's resigning here, but does Kevin McCarthy and the Speaker of the House and leadership up here change their tune? We'll probably hear from them soon on that.
John, big picture, how significant is this for Santos, for the Republican Party, and for faith in the government in general?
Well, you know, it's not the first time we've seen a member of Congress or a prominent politician accused of base crimes, of profiting off their position, of stealing money. But each one does serve to further erode trust, whatever trust there is in Congress at this point. For the Republicans, it's you know, it puts them in a position of trying to figure out whether or not to condemn him, how harshly to condemn him, whether or not to call on him to resign. And all of that plays out against the backdrop of a Congress that is about as narrowly divided as as we have seen in our lifetimes. The Republicans have a mere 5-seat majority. Kevin McCarthy became Speaker of the House, as you remember, after 15 rounds of voting, and it was by a single vote. Keep in mind, George Santos voted for Kevin McCarthy in all 15 of those ballots. So he really can't afford to lose a vote in the House of Representatives. But once again, these are serious charges, and the pressure will be immense to say something about it.
All right, John, Rachel, Aaron, Catherine, thank you all. We'll be right back.
Tonight, keeping an eye on the debt ceiling impasse that could cripple the economy and your monthly budget. Plus, the end of Title 42. What's next? More Americans turn to the most watched program on television, World News Tonight with David Muir.
Right now in America, with so much at stake, thank you for making ABC's This Week America's #1 news and politics show on Sunday mornings.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers.
In Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
From the capital.
Destructive Cat 4 storm.
Here along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
From America's #1 news source.